All right, get ready, because we are diving into the Zelda timeline, like for real this time. This one was a listener request, and I'll be honest, it's a bit daunting.
It's a beast.
Yeah, it's got more twists and turns than like a Goron dance party.
Right.
But fear not, brave adventurers, because we've got this amazing expert analysis you sent. We're going to untangle these timelines, follow the threads, all that jazz. You're going to get those aha moments, even if you think Zelda's just, that annoying dog thing from Smash Bros.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the Zelda timeline. It sucks you in even if you're not, like, a diehard fan.
Yeah.
It really speaks to how well crafted the world is.
Right.
But don't worry, we're not going to go through every single game blow by blow. Today is all about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture.
Right, like why Nintendo just couldn't make a straight timeline.
Exactly, exactly.
We're going full-on Indiana Jones here, people. Dusting off ancient scrolls, looking for clues, and get this story, this whole thing, it starts way before Link ever even picks up a sword.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking creation myths, gods, goddesses, the really good stuff.
It's true. Before we even get to the Hyrule we know and love, like what we think of as classic Zelda, there's this whole other story, this cosmic drama playing out. We've got three goddesses, Din, Nayru, and Furor. They create the world, right? And as a parting gift, they leave behind the Triforce.
Which, just a quick reminder, represents power, wisdom, and courage. The good stuff, but...
There's always a but.
Always.
With great power and all that. This is where the mythology comes in. Like, think about it. Any object imbued with that much power and mythology, it always comes with a catch. Pandora's box, the One Ring, you name it. The Triforce is no different. It's got this magnetic pull for ambition, for good and for bad.
And that's where our main antagonist comes in. Demise. And this guy, he's not just evil, he is like pure malice.
Pure malice.
Distilled.
Distilled.
And the worst part is, even when you beat him, his hate, it just keeps going.
It echoes, yeah, throughout the ages. It's what drives the entire timeline in a way. What's fascinating about Demise is that he embodies this idea that evil can endure. You can't just, kill it and be done with it. He's cursed to this cycle of reincarnation, which means that Hyrule will always be under threat. There's no happily ever after. Not really.
So from the get-go, this struggle, it's baked into Hyrule's DNA, right?
100%.
We're talking eternally high stakes. And speaking of high stakes, that brings us to our first stop on this timeline roller coaster. Skyward Sword.
Here we go.
This is where it all begins, but hold on to your hats because there's a twist. We're not starting in Hyrule, we're in the clouds.
Look at this guy.
We're talking about a civilization called Skyloft, and these guys are living the high life, literally. But here's the kicker. They have no idea what's happening down below. They worship a single goddess. They don't even realize that this goddess, Hylia, is about to pull off the ultimate sacrifice play.
It makes you think, right? How much of what we believe is based on, like, the whole story.
Oh, that got deep fast.
Always does.
So we've got this awesome origin story, but it's shrouded in secrecy, right? There's this weight of history and sacrifice, and we find out that Hylia, she chooses to become mortal. She is reborn as Zelda.
Talk about commitment.
She even goes as far as to create the Master Sword, basically laying the groundwork for, the hero who's going to have to rise up and all that. But listen, this is not your grandma's damsel in distress.
No.
This Zelda, strategic mastermind, she's moving pieces on the chessboard of destiny. And you know how she does it? She's got a time gate.
Yeah, don't forget the time travel.
Hold on, time travel. Are we going full Back to the Future here?
We are, and it's about to get complicated. You see, Hylia using the Gate of Time in Skyward Sword, it creates what we call a fixed point. Everything, all the timelines, they kind of radiate out from this moment. It's like throwing a rock into a pond.
Oh, like that.
Each ripple. That's a different potential timeline.
Okay, my brain is officially fried. We've got gods, demons, time travel, and we're just getting started. Listeners, buckle up. If you thought Hyrule was all about collecting rupees and beating up bokoblins, you're in for a wild ride. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We've got Hyrule's origin story. We've got goddesses, demons, curses, the whole shebang. But after Skyward Sword, it's like Hylia just went, you know what? Let's hit fast forward.
It gets a bit wild, yeah. The timeline starts branching out, creating these distinct eras in Hyrule's history.
And each one has its own flavor, its own quirks. But they're all still connected to those core themes, right?
Absolutely. We're still dealing with courage, wisdom, that constant struggle between good and evil. It repeats, but in new ways.
Like those Russian nesting dolls. You open one up, and there's a smaller one inside and another one inside that.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
So where are we headed first on this chronological joyride?
Let's talk about the Force era.
Oh, this is the one with the Minish, right? They're like the cutest little guys.
They are pretty adorable.
But don't let that fool you. They're packing some serious magic because
Yeah.
they're the reason we have the Force Sword, right? The one that lets Link split himself into multiple copies.
Exactly. The Minish might be tiny, but they're hugely important to the timeline. They create the Force Sword, which becomes this like legendary weapon passed down through generations.
So we've got multiple Links running around.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
It can get pretty chaotic. But hey, that's Hyrule for you.
Speaking of chaos, things really go off the rails when we hit the era of the Hero of Time. This is where Ocarina of Time, arguably one of the most beloved games, throws us a curveball. It's like the timeline just says, you know what, let's split this party into 3.
This is where cause and effect get really interesting. Instead of one straight line, we've got multiple paths, all branching out from the choices this Link makes.
Choices, huh? Sounds heavy.
It can be, but it also allows for so much more storytelling.
I'll say. And at the heart of this era, Ganondorf.
Of course. You can't have an era of the Hero of Time without the villain of the hour.
He's not just a villain, though, is he? He's like iconic, the Gerudo King of Thieves. Cunning, ruthless.
And let's not forget his unhealthy obsession with triangles.
Always gotta have a trademark. But seriously, his arrival changes everything, right?
Ganondorf's appearance is no coincidence. Remember Demise's curse?
Oh, right.
Yeah. Ganondorf's like the physical embodiment of that hate. He's consumed by this lust for power, driven to possess the Triforce. And his actions are what caused the timeline to split into the child timeline, the adult timeline, and then the weird one, the fallen hero timeline.
Okay, time for a timeline breakdown. So the child timeline, this is where Link goes back in time to be a kid again, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, can we talk about the psychological implications of that for a second?
Oh, we could do a whole deep dive on that alone.
Time travel is messy. But anyway, this timeline is where we get Majora's Mask. And that game, it's a whole mood.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've got a moon about to crash into Termina. Talk about high stakes.
And yet, it also deals with these really profound themes. Loss, acceptance, the nature of time itself. It's one of the darker games in the series, thematically.
But it's so good. And then there's the adult timeline. This is what happens if Link stays in the future after defeating Ganondorf, am I right?
Got it.
And that decision comes with consequences.
Major consequences.
This timeline deals with the aftermath of Hyrule while drowning.
It's rough.
We've got the Great Sea, remnants of the old world, and the races that survived. They've had to adapt. The Zora evolved into the Rito. The Kokiri, they're Koroks now.
Adaptation's the key to survival.
So even in the face of catastrophe, life finds a way. I like it. But hold on a sec. What about the Hero of Time? He just, retires to a tropical island somewhere?
He becomes a legend, a whisper in the wind. In Twilight Princess, which takes place generations later, he's this almost mythical figure. We see his influence through the hero's shade, this spectral guide who mentors the new Link.
Okay, now that is just cool. Speaking of cool, we can't forget about the Fallen Hero timeline.
Ah, yes. The outlier.
So this one's weird because it's like, what if the Hero of Time never existed?
Pretty much. It's the timeline where Ocarina of Time's events never happened. So games like A Link to the Past, The Legend of Zelda, those all fit in here.
So they're like in their own little bubble.
In a way, yeah. They have all the classic elements, the Triforce, Ganondorf, the Battle for Hyrule, but it's all happening in this alternate reality.
My head's spinning. So one decision, right? Link going back to being a kid, that's all it takes to fracture the entire timeline of Hyrule. And we've got these 3 distinct branches, each with its own heroes, its own villains, its own story to tell. It's like this giant tapestry, right?
A tapestry of time. I like it.
But here's my question. With all these threads, all these possibilities, is there anything that ties them together? Or are we just lost in a sea of chronological craziness? So 3 timelines, huh? It's a lot to wrap your head around. Like, are we in the Lost Woods or something? Because I'm officially turned around.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. But the cool thing is, even with all these branches, there are these constants, these things that pop up again and again, tying the timelines together, like anchors.
Okay, I like that. Anchors. What kind of anchors are we talking about?
We'll take the Master Sword, for example.
Classic.
Right? It's in every timeline. But where it is, how important it is, that changes. Depending on which branch of the timeline we're on, sometimes it's this big important thing. Other times, it's more like a legend, but it's always there.
Subtle. I like it. But it's not just the Master Sword, is it? What about those other objects, like The fused shadow, the dark mirror, they always seemed kind of sus.
Those are great examples. Those objects, especially the ones connected to the villains, they suggest a deeper connection. Something that goes beyond the individual timelines, like take the dark mirror. It reveals the darkness inside someone.
Yeah, bad vibes.
Exactly. And it really reminds me of the Twilight realm we see in, Twilight Princess.
Oh, yeah.
That whole dimension is about shadow, about this entity called Zant.
Are we saying there's a link
Yeah.
between, like, different dimensions, different flavors of evil?
It's possible, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the Zelda timeline. It's like a puzzle that never really ends. We keep finding new pieces. And there are these inconsistencies, these gaps in the story.
Okay, yeah, like what happened to Impa in Skyward Sword? She just vanishes.
Exactly. And what about those spirits that help Link defeat Maldus? Where did they come from? What's their story?
See, these are the questions that keep me up at night.
Me too. And that's the beauty of it. It's not about having all the answers. It's about the mystery. It's about looking at these little details and thinking, what if?
What if indeed, like what if old Impa from Skyward Sword found a way to like time travel and she's pulling strings in the other timelines?
Or what if those spirits are connected to the ancient beings who helped create Hyrule? What if they're like guardians of the timeline itself?
My mind is blown. Again, this is why we love Zelda, people. So, what's the takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the Zelda timeline is about more than just putting the games in order. It's about engaging with this world, coming up with your own theories, finding your own connections.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Exactly.
So to all you listeners out there, don't just take our word for it. Go back, play the games, read the lore, and see what you discover. The Zelda timeline. It's not about finding the right answer, it's about asking the right questions. And maybe, just maybe, those questions will lead you to your own personal legend.